Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Marianne Howard, and today we're going to be reading from the book The Presidents Stuck in the Bathtub, Poems About the Presidents by Susan Katz. This book gives us a lighthearted poem about each past president and some fun facts for each as well. I've chosen a few presidential favorites and a few that we tend to pass over. So first, what is the president? Not just anyone can be the president. The president has to be at least 35 years old, a resident of the US for at least 14 years, and a citizen of the country. All of these requirements and the actual job description of the president is set forth by the Constitution of the United States, which is the supreme law of the country and which provides a general framework for the national government. The president's job is to serve as the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy, to carry out legislation, which means the laws for the country, and to set foreign policy. The president is also responsible for reporting on the State of the Union from time to time as well. The president serves for 4 years and can be elected to office twice. The United States has had 45 presidents, and 5 of them have been from New York. Martin Van Buren, Millard Fillmore, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Donald Trump. But we aren't the state with the most presidents. Ohio boasts 7, and Virginia boasts 8 presidents. So now on to the poetry. If there was a pandemic in the late 1800s or a major snowstorm at that time, families who were stuck in their homes together would sit around the fire and read poems aloud. And so as I read you these poems, you can imagine families in East Hampton doing the same thing at that time. Okay, so the first president we're going to talk about is George Washington. Quote, "Liberty, when it begins to take root, is plant of rapid growth. Nickname, the father of our country. And fun fact, the first president to be featured on a postage stamp." George Washington served as president from 1789 to 1797, and this poem is called "Where Didn't George Washington Sleep?" George Washington slept at Charles Polk's, Dr. Brown's, Applebee's, Widow Ramsay's, Governor Sharp's, and Judge B's, and his own house, the White House. He must have slept there. I'll check. I know he slept at Hog Island Ferry, Fishkill, Swan Point, Turkey Foot, Eagle's Nest, Frog's Neck, Oyster Bay, Orangetown, Red Bank, and the White House, just a sec. For sure he slept at Washington's Mill, Barron Hill, Beltsville, Port Tobacco, Pomfret, Whippany, Parsippany, Murdering Town, Nicetown, Hobbs Hole, Hackensack. But did he sleep at the White House? Not once, and that's a fact. So as surveyor and a military man, George Washington often traveled. His diaries and letters mention more than 1,000 places where he spent the night. The White House, known in Washington's day as the President's House, took so long to build, however, that Washington, who chose the site and the architects, died before the building was finished, 3 years after John Adams succeeded him. Okay, next up, James Monroe. Quote, "The heart of every citizen must expand with joy when he reflects on how near our government has approached to perfection." Nickname, the era of good feeling president, and fun fact, the first president to ride on a steamboat. James Monroe served as president from 1817 to 1825, and this poem is called A White House Visit. On an afternoon he would long remember, William Crawford, a cabinet member, paid James Monroe a social call that almost became a White House brawl. Crawford shouted and shook his stick, but the president was very quick. He hoisted the fireplace tongs with a heave, and then William Crawford decided to leave. So William H. Crawford, the Secretary of the Treasury, had a long history of political disagreements with James Monroe. On this occasion, as soon as Monroe shouted and grabbed the tongs, Crawford left in a hurry, and he never visited President Monroe again. Okay, next up, Andrew Jackson. Quote, "One man with courage makes a majority." Nickname, Old Hickory. So hickory is an adjective for anyone who's tough, obstinate, or hard after the tree of the same name. And Jackson merited this nickname from his soldiers on the battlefield on account of his tough, unyielding disposition during the War of 1812. And fun fact, he was the first president to ride on a train. And he served as president from 1829 to 1837, and this poem is called Spelling Bee. Andrew Jackson, some people claim, was barely able to spell his own name. He was never the champ of a spelling bee and never the one to spell Mississippi. Yet he kept the Congress under his thumb. He couldn't spell right, but he wasn't dumb. So Andrew Jackson was one of our strongest presidents, using his forceful personality to expand the powers of the presidency. Though he couldn't master the spelling of even a simple word such as bugs, which he often spelled Buggs, this problem didn't disturb him. In fact, he's reported to have claimed that a person who could spell a word only one way lacked imagination. Okay, next up is Abraham Lincoln. Quote, with malice towards none, with charity towards all, and nicknamed Honest Abe for his reputation as an honest lawyer and politician. Fun fact, first president born outside the boundaries of the 13 original states in the area of Kentucky. And Abraham Lincoln served as president from 1861 to 1865, and this poem is called Hatbox. Abraham Lincoln wore a hat as tall and skinny as he was. More than an ornament for his head, this president used his hat instead for carrying papers, his letters and bills, or legal documents like wills. Messy fragments spilled everywhere, his written scraps tumbling over his hair. Wasn't it apt for thoughts that set the world ablaze to be stored in a stovepipe hat? So to avoid losing his papers, Abraham Lincoln stuffed them into his hat. And a story is told that he once bought a new hat and forgot to answer a letter because he left it in his old hat. When Lincoln's actual stovepipe hat was sent to Chicago for an exhibit of Lincoln artifacts in 1997, it was considered so valuable that it arrived not only carefully padded and crated, but also accompanied by an escort. Okay, next up for today, Ulysses S. Grant. Quote, there are but few important events in the affairs of men brought about by their own choice. Nicknamed the hero of Appomattox. Why? For his actions in defeating the Army of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee and the terms of surrender he wrote out on April 9, 1865, effectively ending the Civil War. And fun fact, he was the first president to establish a national park. Which one? Yellowstone. Ulysses S. Grant served as president from 1869 to 1877, and this poem is called Out Hunting. Hunting wild turkeys, Ulysses Grant remembered to stalk silently, to hide carefully deep in the trees. When 2, 3, or 20 handsome turkeys thundered by, not one escaped his eye. Grant remembered to watch where they flew, but there was one thing he forgot to do. Oh, shoot! Yet by keeping his gun propped on his shoulder, he gave those birds a shot at growing older. Persuaded to go turkey hunting by his friend, Grant was so fascinated by watching the turkeys fly that he never thought to aim his gun at them. Although Grant, as general, was responsible for leading his men into some of the bloodiest battles in U.S. history, he was unusually gentle with animals and children. As a boy, he couldn't bear working in his father's tannery, where animal hides are made into leather, and so all his life he hated the sight of blood so much that he wouldn't even eat rare meat. Okay, next up, Grover Cleveland. Quote, I have tried so hard to do right. Nickname, Grover the Good. And fun fact, first president to have a child born in the White House. And Grover Cleveland served as president from 1885 to 1889, and then 1893 to 1897, and this poem is called Double Take. Who was president 22? Grover Cleveland, that's who. And who was president 24? Grover Cleveland once more. Defeated by President 23, did Grover Cleveland quit? Not he. One of the most determined of men, he stood right up and tried again. The reward for this resolve was immense. Cleveland gets counted as 2 presidents. So as Lady Frances Cleveland departed the White House in 1889 after Benjamin Harrison's defeat of her husband, she instructed the White House staff to take good care of things because the Clevelands would be back in 4 years. And indeed they were. Grover Cleveland, a man so determined that he would be sometimes referred to as his obstinacy, ran against Benjamin Harrison a second time and won, becoming the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms in office. So now that being said, let's talk about Benjamin Harrison, nickname Little Ben. Fun fact, the first president to have a grandfather also be president, and that was William Henry Harrison, our 9th president. So Harrison served as president from 1889 to 1893, and this poem is called The President Sees the Light. In 1891, the president, Benjamin Harrison, ordered electric lights in the White House, but he would let the lights burn the whole night long unless a bold servant doused them. It seems the president was too scared to flick the switches from on to off. What a shock. Benjamin Harrison was so afraid of getting an electric shock that he asked Ike Hoover, one of the electricians, to remain at the White House to turn the lights on and off. And Hoover liked being there so well that he stayed and worked as a White House aide for more than 40 years. Okay, so next up is William Howard Taft. Quote, politics makes me sick. Nickname, Big Bill. And fun fact, first president to pitch a ball to open baseball season. And that was in 1910 between the Washington Senators and the Philadelphia Athletics. So Taft served as president from 1909 to 1913, and this poem is called The President Stuck in the Bathtub. In the midst of his bath, poor President Taft discovered the tub didn't fit him. In fact, he got stuck. What horrible luck! Taft filled the tub up to the brim. When he gave a loud shout, people hoisted him out by tugging him here and there. Then they built a new tub in which 4 men could scrub, though I doubt that Taft wanted to share. Singing Rub-a-Dub-Dub, Taft enjoyed his grand tub. There was never a further commotion. Despite his great weight, I'm pleased to relate, he stayed safe in his own private ocean. So, at his largest, William Howard Taft weighed 350 pounds. The 4 workers who installed his new bathtub were photographed all sitting together. Ironically, when Harry S. Truman was living in the White House, his bathtub, a normal-sized one, began to sink as he was taking a bath one day, and so the Trumans had to move out while the White House was being repaired. Okay, next up, Herbert Hoover. Quote, prosperity is just around the corner. Nickname, the Great Engineer. He was a mining engineer. And fun fact, he's the first president to have an asteroid named after him. And Herbert Hoover served as president from 1929 to 1933, and this poem is called Lost in Translation. In crowds, since he hated to be overheard, this president wouldn't use one English word. He spoke to his wife in Chinese instead. It's disturbing to think what they would have said. Your zipper's unzipped, you ate too much bread, your corset's too tight, and you're turning red. That gentleman looks like a shrunken head. The possibilities fill one with dread. Imagine them saying whatever they pleased. Did that man wipe his nose with his tie when he sneezed? That lady is scratching. I bet she has fleas. These folks are such windbags. I'm feeling a breeze. This caviar tastes just like antifreeze. The Hoovers kept secrets with such total ease, it might incline others to study Chinese. When Lou and Herbert Hoover were first married, they lived in China, where Mrs. Hoover learned to speak fluent Mandarin. Though the president only knew about 100 Chinese words, he kept those words fresh in his mind by using them for secret conversations. Okay, next up for today, Lyndon B Johnson. Quote, in each generation, with toil and tears, we have had to earn our heritage again. Nickname, LBJ. An interesting fact, he was the first president to take the oath of office in a plane aboard Air Force One in Dallas following the assassination of John F. Kennedy earlier that day. Lyndon B. Johnson served as president from 1963 to 1969, and this poem is called LBJ. President Lyndon Baines Johnson had a wife, Lady Bird Johnson, a daughter named Linda Bird Johnson, a daughter named Lucy Baines Johnson, a dog named Little Beagle Johnson, a horse named Lady B. Johnson, a nickname Lightbulb Johnson, and a ranch called the LBJ. And when his fans chanted LBJ all the way, they weren't kidding. So Lyndon B. Johnson earned his nickname Lightbulb Johnson by walking through the White House every night, turning off the lights to save taxpayer money. Mrs. Johnson, whose legal name is Claudia, received her nickname at the age of 2 when the family cook called her purty as a lady bird. The president sometimes joked that his family saved money on luggage by all having the same monogram. Okay, and the last president we're going to talk about today is Gerald Ford. Quote, I'm actually aware that you have not elected me as your president by your ballots, and so I ask you to confirm me as your president with your prayers. He was sworn in after Richard M. Nixon had resigned. His nickname was Jerry, and fun fact, he was the first president to escape 2 assassination attempts by women. So Gerald R. Ford served as president from 1974 to 1977, and this poem is called President What's His Name? When he was born, Gerald Ford was named for his father, Leslie Lynch King. When he learned to walk and learned to talk, he was Leslie Lynch King Jr. Before he was 5, he was renamed for his stepfather, Gerald Rudolph Ford. Without that change, one of America's presidents would have been a king. In childhood, both before and after his parents' divorce and his mother's remarriage, Gerald R. Ford was actually called June for Junior. Ford's name change was the most drastic of any presidents, but 6 other presidents, Grant, Cleveland, Wilson Coolidge, Eisenhower, and Clinton, also changed their names. So I hope that you enjoyed this reading today. If you would like a copy of this or any of the other books that we've been reading to you, you can email us at programs@easthamptonhistory.org and we can let you know where you can find your own copy. And you can join me next Wednesday, May 27th at 3:30 p.m. as I read you a second batch of poems from this book and we learn about a whole new set of presidents. And I'll see you then, East Hampton.